The Manichaeans had an enormous success. They lasted 1,000 years and had a church that spread from modern-day Iran all the way through to Tibet, where Mani is still remembered as the Buddha of light. But they left no kingdom. There is no modern kingdom or nation that claims Manichaeism as part of its heritage because of the success of Islam, essentially. And when Genghis Khan came sweeping in, that was the end of it. We never heard of Manichaeism again. But what is interesting is that the stories of Mani make it quite clear that his father was a Subba, a baptizer. So there seems to have been baptizing sects out in the Middle East right the way back to the 3rd century. And then we find that there are these people still in Iraq claiming to be followers of St. John, but they've been wiped out. And what's more, they're Gnostic, and their claims are quite astonishing. Essentially, they believe in a being called the Great Life. I've got all of the actual Mandaean terms here. And this will be familiar to anybody who has read about Gnosticism. The Great Life created spirits of light, but one of these, referred to in some texts as El, or in others as Adonai, forgot that he was a creation, and so set about creating his own universe, which is where we live. And as a result, imprisoned spirits in order to animate his creations. And that's us. That we are imprisoned in flesh in a universe upon which the Great Life makes no claim. Now, this is known generally in church history as the theory of the demiurge. And this was the big Gnostic heresy, that the God of the Jews, Adonai, Yahweh, whatever he's called, was not the true God, but merely a halfway God who'd rebelled against the true God, in roughly the same way that we later see the idea of Satan rebelling against Yahweh or Jehovah. These people are claiming that John the Baptist came not to rid people of sins in the ordinary sense, but to rid them of anything that stops them from escaping this world and going into the light world. And he sent a being of light known as Anus Uthra, although there's a couple of other names, down into the world and raised up the animal part of human nature. We have two natures, if you like, the divine and the animal. But both of these, if the correct rituals are carried out and the correct belief systems followed, will be purified and taken out of the world into the light world. This is all very interesting, but it's another small minority sect that we can never find anything out about. We thought. I work at the Charity Commission in London as a civil servant, helping charities out. And about 2 months ago, became aware of an organisation called the United Kingdom Association of Mandaens. Now, my first thought was Americans. Has to be. There are so many different odd churches in America that have got various offshoots over here claiming to be Essenes, Gnostics, you name it. I started doing some research and going onto the web and meeting up and discovered, no, these are actually Iraqi Mandaeans. They got away. Quite simply, when Saddam Hussein took power and started using them for target practice, they legged it. And they made it to Australia, America, Sweden, Holland, Canada, Manchester, Catford. Anybody who knows London will know my astonishment at finding living representatives of a Gnostic community in Catford. And so I went to meet them. And certain things became clear. And certain things have got even muddier. And then, the St. John Christians. There's a symbol that they use, the priests use. It's a stick. It's not a carved stick because they never do anything like that. Everything is almost as natural. A stick goes up here with a crossbeam. And when the priests are baptizing, and they go through baptism at several times, it's not a single baptism and you're it. Baptism in flowing water, living water as it's called, is considered to be a vastly important signifier of spiritual cleanliness, as is light. But it's emphasised that the flowing water and the light are only symbols. However, when the priest, who wears a stole, rather like a bishop's stole, is going to be doing the baptisms, he takes it off and hangs it on the crossbar of his staff to stop it from getting wet. And this is prescribed in the Mandaean literature going back thousands of years. It looks like a cross. It's not surprising that people seeing these people carrying out, Christians from the West, thought that they must be Christians. They're carrying a cross. And sort of makes you wonder why it was that the cross became such an important symbol. For those who haven't come across it, it wasn't the earliest Christian symbol. The fish was one of the earliest Christian symbols, and the cross took off later. Why would this have been important? Well, they were stopped by the Muslims, as I said, from proselytizing. The Manichaeans, who came from the prophet Mani, whose father was one of these people, managed to move further east and stay ahead of the Muslims, and they never stopped proselytizing. And it was quite interesting to note that until the Muslims came along, not only did they make converts, they also had women priests. And this female priesthood only died out because of, scary, because the Muslims just couldn't handle it. So you have a system that revolves around John, more than anything else, and that has female and male priests. And here's the most important thing to me: a complete division between the priesthood and the ordinary members. When I went to meet the Manichaeans, I was hoping for two things: insight into their religion and to be able to help these poor refugees. I've got to say, the second part of it is only formal. The Mandaeans used a technique which was used by many racial and religious minorities in India to escape persecution. They became middle class. During the last few hundred years, they became goldsmiths and silversmiths, always important in a country which likes jewellery so much. Then, when Iraq was created, they became doctors. They became engineers. They became everything that an emerging nation-state needed, and so became very, very important to the Iraqi government. One of the side effects of this, unfortunately, is that there are a few secular Mandaeans who are cooperating with Saddam Hussein and putting up some rather ridiculous websites and spreading disinformation. They do not have any priests. There's only one priest in this country, and I didn't get to talk to him because he's in his late 80s and he couldn't actually make it down from Manchester to London. And the ordinary Mandaeans know very little about their own religion because it's not important. All that's important is that the priesthood carry out the correct rituals and know the religion, and everybody else follows, providing they follow certain rules which are standard religious type rules. You're not supposed to, they're pacifists, they're remarkably pacifist, and adultery and all this general sort of rules to keep a tribe together are followed. They primarily see themselves as a culture. Interestingly enough, I got to meet a handful of Iranian Mandaeans because a few survived in Iran and remarkably managed to keep the Mandaean language alive as well. And I suddenly realised, well, of course, this is exactly what we see in the Cathar areas. We see a male and female priesthood with a remarkable following amongst ordinary people. This is not a religion which is too complicated for ordinary people to follow. If anything, it's easier for ordinary people to follow because you're not expected to learn the detail of the religious beliefs in order to profit from it. You let the priesthood sort that out. And where did the Cathars come from? The Cathars are following a basic Gnostic belief that we are imprisoned in a world of flesh. And the Cathars have a male and a female priesthood, and they have to be wiped out. And out of that, and after that, the Templars get persecuted, and a few hundred years later, claiming Templar origins, the Freemasons emerge, with a great emphasis upon John, admittedly with a male priesthood only, but with some other rather interesting Manichaean concepts as well, including one that has been noted before, which was the habit of referring to Jesus as the son of the widow, and also, as I discovered recently, the fact that the Manichaeans had a belief that their God was about to enter a new phase, and it was the duty of Manichaeism to help build the next phase of the world, the next phase of the universe, with the result that they referred to God as the great builder, which I think we can take as being roughly the same as the great architect. And finally, the thing that really starts linking these things together to me is the Manichaean attitude, because modern Manichaean, I am speaking by email with a modern Manichaean priest, and it's quite interesting to see how, now that they're the ones deciding how to translate Mandean terms into English, the language that they're using. And nearly everything that we've ever had on Mandaens has been translated into English by non-Mandeans. Some of it is vastly wrong. For example, Drower insists that these people are great astrologers. They're at great emphasis to wear the correct astrological symbols. In fact, they regard astrology as being totally and utterly wrong. Not because it's evil, but because it's of the material world. And now, the Mandeans are saying that the best English word to describe the world, as it's been translated, is universe. With the result that some of them use one of the names of the great life in English as the alien. Now, of course, saying that there's a group of people who believe that the universe was created by an alien tends to have a slightly different feel to it in the sort of circles that maybe some of us have found ourselves moving in. The other is, of course, that the great life makes no claim upon this universe, and that includes the 7 planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac. And they talk in their scripture about turning away from the 7 and the 12. So since most of what we've known about the Mandeans has come from people who've managed to get that bit completely wrong, it's a very exciting time. The ordinary Mandeans do not know a great deal about their religion. They admit it. They do know that at the new year they have to stay indoors for 2 days. They also have to run any water that they're going to need before that period. And the reason for this, I was told, was because when John the Baptist, or Yohanna or Yahya as he's known, Yahya is a later usage that comes from Islam, was escaping from his enemies, he had to hide in a cave for 2 days. And he had no running water. At which point another Mandean said, "That isn't what we're told in our family. We're told that at the New Year period, all the souls of dead Mandeans are taken by beings of light who enter the universe, the material universe, and snatch the souls away back into the light world, and that takes 2 days. But because they're so busy doing that, they can't look after the living Mandeans. So they don't even know the sort of thing. It's like knowing, why do we celebrate Christmas? Well, it's either because Jesus was born or crucified, one of the two, it doesn't really matter. You know, which seems at first very irreligious. But to me, this gets rid of the argument about Gnosticism being too complicated. It gets rid of the idea that there can have been no real mass interest in this Gnostic faith that suddenly turns up in southern France, in Provence, and then mysteriously vanishes. Only for great emphasis on St. John, and only for these symbols of Gnosticism to start entering our culture via possibly the Templars, definitely the Freemasons,